Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to be having this conversation today. I feel like I say that every single time that we get a wonderful guest here with us to answer our questions. But today I am incredibly excited to announce that we are going to be talking about ADD and ADHD. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart as an individual that was diagnosed at the age of 16 with ADD and has struggled for many, many years with managing that ADD successfully with medication, without medication. And so today, our guest is going to talk to us about some of the more holistic ways that you can be managing your ADD or helping a loved one to manage their ADD. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Dr. Connie McReynolds. Dr. McReynolds, would you share a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for having me, Lindsay. It's great to be here. So, a little bit about me. My career spans 30 plus years. Oh, 35, I have to redo the math once in a while. It's starting out really in rehabilitation counseling, rehabilitation psychology. I'm a licensed psychologist in Southern California, certified rehabilitation counselor in all 50 states. And really, my work began decades ago working with individuals who were struggling. As a rehabilitation counselor, I helped individuals find their strengths and then also mitigate the weaknesses that they felt or their limitations, finding the workarounds. And it really set the stage for what I didn't realize was going to be almost 4 decades of work now. The most recent culminating in the last 15, 16 years, where I'm the founder of Neurofeedback clinics in Southern California. And with that work, what we do is really help individuals with a broad range of conditions from ADD, ADHD to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, attention problems, learning problems, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, kind of name it. We actually help the brain retrain itself so that these conditions can go away and they don't tend to come back. And so, in a nutshell, that's really what I've done. And I recently published a book called Solving the ADHD Riddle that is out on Amazon. And it really culminates and is the story of where I've been for the last 15, 16 years. But ebbs all the way back to my childhood and my mother teaching for 32 years and the stories that I listened to in the evenings and the children who struggled in her classes and really the infusion of that into who I am today.
Wow. That's quite the story. I'm so thrilled that you're here with us today. And I know that we're going to dive deep into neurofeedback and how that can help individuals. Just to kind of set the stage, I know that we've had the chance to talk a little bit about some of the members of my audience here. We really do focus on the wide range of people. There's not just one particular group that will be listening to this episode. So we might have somebody that's a kid that's just out of high school that's trying to figure out what it is that they're going to do next. We've got young adults that are navigating their first few jobs. We've got, of course, the parents of those individuals that will be listening in and trying to figure out how can I support my kid a little bit better. But we also have those mid to late career professionals and business owners and people that are trying to start businesses and even retirees. So I would love to open up our conversation today to the broader spectrum. I know that it could be really helpful when we narrow in, but I'm hoping that we can have a broader discussion today that will encompass all of those individuals and really help us to understand the high level information that we need to know, as well as some of the things that we can do in order to, if we focus in on ADHD or ADD, the things that we need to know and the things that we can do in order to support the people in our lives a little bit better.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I want to start with the landscape as a whole. Could you talk to us a little bit about ADD, ADHD, the difference between them? Who is it impacting and how is it impacting them?
Mhm. Well, I think most people feel like there has certainly been an uptick in the number of diagnoses or the people who are feeling like they have attention span problems or memory problems. It cuts across every decade. My youngest client has been 3, and the oldest client has been 93.
Wow.
And they used to meet in the hallway and shake hands. And what they both had in common is we did have to teach both of them how to use the mouse. So there you go. We cut across everything. The impact of ADHD, the impact of these attention difficulties, I think is fairly broad reaching. We see this in jobs. I recently worked with a veteran who was struggling in her job because she was in a call center I have an assessment. She was referred to us for services. I ran the assessment and actually uncovered the fact that she didn't have very effective auditory processing skills. And here she is sitting in a call center.
Mm.
She was literally going out of her mind every single day because she couldn't keep up the pace with what was coming. Supervisors were quite unhappy with her productivity. And really, it was a matter of identifying the fact that this was a mismatch.
Mm.
And so when we think about any kind of employment setting, we really need to be playing to our strengths. The problem is most people have some vague sense of what works and what doesn't work. Most people don't have a real clear idea as to why they might be struggling in
Mm.
one area or another, children and adults alike. Age isn't a factor here. Socioeconomic condition isn't a factor here per se. When it comes to if I have auditory visual processing problems, I don't know what this is. I don't know what to call it. I might say I have a poor memory. I might say I'm not very smart.
Mm.
I might say I can't I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. Or like the veteran, I'm losing my mind at my job. And so when we have these impacts with these processing problems, our memory can actually be affected. And so we have older generations of folks who think they're developing dementia or Alzheimer's. And it isn't to rule that out because I haven't met with them and assessed them. However, what if there is actually something else going on that could be easily tackled and you can have a better memory? That's really where I live and what we do.
Wow, that's super interesting. I didn't realize that that could be something that somebody was experiencing. That is it cognitive decline or cognitive impairment that you would kind of classify that as?
Well, it can be called a lot of different things, is what I've discovered.
Gotcha.
People come in diagnosed with a long list of conditions sometimes, and I don't really turn a lot on diagnostic labels for that reason.
Mm.
Because I literally can have 10 people walk into a clinic in any given day, all called the same thing, and none of them look anything alike
Yeah.
in their behaviors and what they're struggling with. It's all unique to the person. And so, what I early on discovered is that, well, I really believe this from my training back a long time ago, which is the label may get you in the door, but it doesn't tell me too much about who you are or what you're dealing with. That comes from my communication and understanding you and understanding what you are dealing with. And from that, then I can draw some conclusions. And with the assessment that we use, we're able to dial down so we can really get into some specifics about understanding what you're dealing with. And when we
Hmm.
can get that, it can be a game changer for people.
You talked a little bit about auditory versus visual processing. I was wondering if you could maybe break that down a little bit further. I know that's not something that I ever went through when I was going through my diagnosis back when
Mhm.
I was 16. That's not something that we even talked about. And so I feel like I've lived my life just kind of struggling through and figuring things out and testing a lot of stuff, but never having any formal instruction of what might be going on for me. Could you break those two down for me so that everybody kind of understands the difference?
So visual processing, let's say we look in the child's backpack and it looks like a little explosion has gone off in there. Things are a total mess. You walk into the bedroom and can you even find the bed? Where are the shoes? Everything's a train wreck. And no matter how many times as a parent I have said, clean up your room, get this mess straightened up, nothing seems to change.
Mm.
It doesn't matter how many times I've said do it. Doesn't matter how many times I've gone in and cleaned it up. 2 days later, it looks like I'd never walked in the door. That's visual processing
Okay.
because it's an organizational skill set that's required for visual processing to be able to put things in a particular order, to see how things fit together.
Mm.
And if I can't process this, we've got a video clip that I've used over the years in which this teenage boy talks about this very thing. He didn't know it was called visual processing. And he's talking about before he had neurofeedback that he would walk into his room and he needed to change the sheets on the bed. And he would look at that bed and he would stand there and he would have no idea what to do. He'd say, this looks like something that I have no idea how I'm supposed to do. How do you get any of this put together? And then he had done neurofeedback later and he said, well, it's easy. You walk in, you take the top sheets off, you put the bottom sheets on, you put the covers back on. He said, but when you have ADHD or you have what I call visual processing problems, you can't get things in an ordered step or sequencing.
Mm.
And so you can't sequence. And so this can actually be a child who bumps into things, trips over things. It can be a child whose handwriting is just abominable. So they can't put the letters together in a right way that's legible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they may not be able to pass spelling tests, but you can, on the way to school, you're practicing the spelling words. You know they've got it. They've got it. They're doing great. They fail the test. The teacher thinks they don't know the material. Child feels like a failure. The parent goes, "What happened? You knew this on the way in." That can be visual processing because it takes visual processing ability to be able to get data down on to a piece of paper.
Mm. Mm.
Auditory is equally interesting and a struggle because if you think about how we give instructions to people in our world, it tends to be auditorily.
Yeah.
And so I had an adult man come into my clinic years ago who was in jeopardy of losing what he said was yet another job. And he said, "I can't remember what my boss tells me. And he's so mad at me all the time because I can't recall what he just told me to do." We did this assessment. It turns out he didn't have auditory memory. So he couldn't process auditory information. He thought he wasn't smart and used a lot less flattering language about himself with that. And the same goes with children. So with auditory processing, we have to be able to take in, like what I'm giving you right now. We have to be able to attend to it. We have to be able to store it temporarily. Our brain has to be able to comprehend what the sentence structure is. And if I don't have that skill set, I'm just going to sit here and stare at you, and you're going to think I'm not paying attention. You're
Yeah.
going to think I'm drifting off, which people look like they do. They find them staring out the window in the classroom. And so they're always in trouble for, quote, not paying attention.
Mm. Is it possible for you to have both at the same time?
Absolutely. You can have a mixed bag of it. And that's probably the most common situation
Oh,
is that
really?
you can have some good processing for auditory, some good for visual. You can have some weak for auditory and weak for visual. And that mixed bag can be a little harder to deal with in some ways than if you're strictly auditory or strictly visual. Because if you have fully one functional, we can always defer to that one. So if you don't have any visual processing, we can defer to auditory and you have good, strong auditory. You can kind of get by.
Mm.
Uh, it's a little easier to get by if you have some auditory processing than it is if you don't have any, because our world is still language, spoken language driven.
That's so interesting. Do you also see that there are some other either comorbidities or elements that are showing up, characteristics for individuals? Maybe even talk to us a little bit about dopamine and the way that that plays a role. But I'm just curious, are there other things that you see in addition to auditory and visual processing that kind of stand out with individuals with the ADD or ADHD?
Well, certainly anxiety tends to travel with this. And it's almost which came first. It's really impossible to kind of unravel that because if we didn't assess this person, at the first light of dawn, so to speak, we're not going to really know if that was present then or if it's something that's been acquired or picked up or developed or, kind of rolled out over the time.
Mm.
However, it isn't infrequent that people show up with anxiety, depression, panic disorders, OCD, which is, obsessive compulsive disorders, trauma, which trauma is its own thing. So that has its own starting point. However, what I have found is about 85 to 90% of the people that I work with, they also have these underlying auditory and visual processing problems. And so we tackle both of these simultaneously. But we have to figure out that it's there before we can do something about it.
Yeah, that's just so fascinating. So let's talk about what to do about it. Because I'm
Yeah.
sure that everybody is super curious about that. Tell me all about neurofeedback, what it does, what is the experience like to engage in neurofeedback, and then what's the result?
Mhm. So neurofeedback is really EEG biofeedback. Most people have heard the term biofeedback, and biofeedback really just means feedback from biological data from you, your body. And so that started out decades ago with a sensor that maybe goes on your finger to measure your pulse rate. And if we taught you how to breathe differently, you can affect your pulse rate. So you literally could get the feedback on the equipment and see that, oh, if I slow down my breathing and settle in a little bit, I can lower my pulse rate.
Mm.
So that's the beginning of a lot of this. Neurofeedback is similar in the stance that it is gathering data from you. The neurofeedback is actually gathering your brainwave information, though. So we don't have to use a scope to get in there. We just use sensors like you do for an EKG to measure how your brainwaves are functioning. And it's done through the scalp and a little bit on your ears, the ground, a little sensor. And it's fed one way. So there's nothing going back to you. People have asked me, oh, are you going to shock me? And it's like, no. And so I used to get that so often in my presentations, I would say, no, but your results can be shocking.
I
So
like it.
So it is simply reading how your brain is functioning through brain waves, and that's fed into the computer. You're learning from the feedback because you're interacting with the data on the screen in real time.
Mm,
So this is a nearly instantaneous reading of your brain waves. And if, for example, we're dealing with anxiety, the sensors are actually going to flash excess tension if you're in a tension state. So I've had people who've been meditators for years. Oh, I've meditated for years. We sit them down and the computer's flashing excess tension. And they're going, that computer can't be right. It's like, actually, it is because this is the data from your brain and how your brain is operating. So it isn't coming from anywhere else except your brain. And that's where we affect so much change because I can think I'm in a meditative state, but maybe I never really get there because I
mhm.
really don't even know what a meditative true state is. I just know, okay, maybe I sit still for a minute or two. Maybe, maybe I feel calmer, but maybe I'm not really getting to a therapeutic level of addressing the anxiety or the panic or whatever it is that my brain is responding to in the environment. So we usually do about 20 or 40 sessions. It usually equates to about 20 hours of training. We do 30-minute sessions, and we do that 2 or 3 times a week. And after every 10 hours, we're coming back and reassessing for the baseline comparison to when we first started, which was gathering that data in those 37 areas, as well as memory conceptualization sequencing assessments. So we have hardcore evidence-based data that we can compare. And a lot of people like data. They like graphs. They like to see, okay, my brain's improved. Here's the data.
Yeah.
Because as our brain improves, it's kind of like walking into a room with a dimmer switch. You're not paying close attention and the change is slow enough, you don't really even realize the light's getting brighter. You can't really notice it because your brain doesn't have enough contrast to be able to see it. And because these changes are slow over time, meaning they're getting wired in a nearly permanent status, then you may not notice it. Although I will say some people do. And so I had a veteran one time who we'd been dealing with him for trauma for quite a while. And he walks in, he said, it's working. It's like, well, okay, tell me what happened. And he said he was in the parking lot the week before and he pulled out and this woman in a van pulled out and hit him. She got out of the car, was on her cell phone and brushing her teeth at the same time. And he would have gone ballistic, he said, in the
Mm,
past. He said he would have perseverated for days over this situation. He said he went back home and an hour or two later, he realized he completely let it go. He said that had never happened to him in his adult life. And
wow.
it's like, okay, so that's the lived experience. And that's what I'm looking for is the lived experience of change that's happening. Sometimes spouses can see it more than the person can. We had a case in point where her husband could never remember what the grocery list was on the way home
Hmm.
that the wife needed. And so she brought him in because she was at her limit with how things were going in the marriage. And we worked with him for a while. And then he came in one day and he goes, I have good news to report. And I said, what's that? He said, I got everything on the grocery list last night. I said, all right.
Amazing. I'm just thinking about Corey right now as you're saying this because he leaves projects half done. I will have to walk around behind him and just pick things up and be like, oh, we're going to half complete this particular project today, huh? So, I mean, I'm all in
Yes,
for me,
yes.
for him. Yeah. So could
Well,
you tell me, oh, sorry, you go.
I was going to say it's a game changer for families because
Yeah.
when you have this going on, there's a lot of tension that can happen. And this, first of all, the information relieves some of the tension. Because if you can actually understand what's happening, and I can give you tips on what to do about that while you're going through, then that helps. And then when we get the brain kind of tuned up, and by the way, it does not change your personality. So if you have a great personality, you don't have to worry about that happening. We're just tuning you up like a great Ferrari. So let's just get everything lined up so you can demonstrate who you really are.
So what's that tune up? element, right? So you do the assessment, you see what's going on inside of the brain. What's the thing that is actually changing and doing the tuning?
It's the neuronal pathways. So the way the brain learns everything you've ever learned is through one way, and that's repetition. And
Hmm.
so it's repetition until it becomes the habit. And once we learn how to write, we don't tend to forget how to write unless we've had a brain injury or something
Hmm.
has come along to disrupt that learning. Generally, we're good to go. So part of what happens though is that sometimes the brain can't learn some of these things, these tasks, these processes, routines for whatever reason. We don't really know why. So people will say, well, why do I have this? I can't answer that one.
Mm.
I can say, here's what. Here's what is going on, and this is what we can do about it. So it's through the repetition. We build training plans based on the information I've gathered during the intake
Okay.
that is tailored specifically to you. So once we understand what parts are working well, and then are there these other areas that really aren't working so well? And what can we do about that? So these are training plans, kind of like going to the gym, only
Okay.
it's the gym for your brain. So we're the training coach here.
Yeah.
So we build your training plan and you attend 2 or 3 times a week for 30-minute sessions. We do 20 of those. And then we're going to run you through the assessment again, like we did on
Yeah.
the front end.
Yeah.
So then you've got the before and you've got the current data that we do the comparison on, and it's just training. That's what's so beautiful about this is we are capitalizing on what your brain does well,
Mm.
which is learn patterns. So the brain learns through repetition. And that's also, by the way, why that bad habit is so hard to switch out because
Yeah.
it's hardwired in. So we're just hardwiring in those areas that aren't quite strong enough yet. Just we call it kind of rewiring, but we're really sometimes we're building the wires and sometimes we're strengthening them. Just depends on where the person needs to go. And
Gotcha.
it looks like really low impact video games, but they've really been designed to tackle the specifics that we're needing to strengthen. So we'll choose programs that kind of align with the person's interests or those areas that we really need to strengthen. And through the repetition, there may be 5 or 6 or 7 of these programs in the training plan, kind of like thinking about different pieces of gym equipment. So
Yeah.
you have a routine that you go through, and you're building certain muscles when you go through the routine at the gym. And it's the same thing here for your brain. You're going through a training plan that's a routine
Mm.
that's teaching your brain. If you have memory challenges, we're going to strengthen memory. If there's focus and attention, or I don't have any sequencing memory because if you ask me to go get the red folder out front, go to the back door, get the yellow one, go around and get the blue can of paint and come back in and tell me where you picked everything up, you're going, was there something blue I was supposed to get?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so fascinating. Yeah, I'm so interested in doing this for myself because I feel like there are certain areas that I struggle with. I've created my own tools, but it just almost
Absolutely.
feels like a crutch, right? That I'm just putting a band-aid onto something that really needs stitches. And
Mhm.
it sounds like this is one of those ways that you can truly get to the root cause instead of just trying to mask it with something like medication.
Well, and that's really the truth here, because regardless of what a diagnostic label is that a person presents with or comes in the door with, it's like, okay, I realize that someone is diagnosed that. Let's set that aside for a moment and
Hmm.
let's just see kind of how this is playing out in your life. What are you noticing that's in your life that's working? What isn't working? So I have a series of questions I go through, and then we do the assessment. And that gives us a fairly good picture of what's working and what isn't working. And on the parts that aren't strong enough, then that becomes the targeted position. And I say we do get to the root cause because if you have auditory and visual processing problems, you don't know that that's what this is. People will always default to thinking I'm not smart enough, or why do I have to work twice as hard as Joe or Henry or
Yeah.
whomever, Betty down the street here, call the name out, because people who have auditory and visual processing problems end up working a lot harder to be able to achieve the things that they want to achieve. And it's through no fault of intelligence. And that's the place where children and adults will almost invariably go, is that I must not be as smart as I ought to be in
Yeah.
order to do what I need to do. This has nothing to do with your intelligence. I've worked with geniuses, and in the book, I tell a story of this teenager who had been in special education his entire academic career. He was in high school, a teenager. he got particularly bored one afternoon and decided he didn't like one of the grades his teacher had given him, so he hacked the school's computer system to change his grade. Been in special ed all this time, and this was the first time anyone knew that he was at near genius level.
Wow. Yeah.
Got kicked out. The dad called me. So we have a little problem. It's like, okay, let's deal with this. And he was a surly teenager by this time. He was angry. He was in fights all the time because he couldn't demonstrate what he knew. He had very low self esteem, poor self confidence. And that's what leads to fighting and just disruptive behaviors in children.
Mhm.
And I want to sidebar here just a second because I want to say these behaviors are not happening in a vacuum. They're not happening out of willful badness. They're happening because a child's trying to tell you something.
Mm.
That there's something going on here. They don't know how to explain it, and all they have are their behaviors. So fast forward now after treatment for this young man. He was in a new school the next year. He scored the highest in the school's history on
Wow.
the state math exam that next year
Wow.
in the school's history.
That's so
And
impressive.
he'd been in special education his whole life.
Yeah, I feel like you see that a lot, right? That people get typecast early, and whether they get diagnosed or don't get diagnosed, whatever treatment plan, if it doesn't have some of these more holistic approaches, again, we're just slapping a band-aid on a situation and not getting to the root challenge that that individual is faced with.
Mm.
I think that this is one of those things that, why we don't start here is
Well, that's my
quite
mission in the
confusing.
world.
Yeah, yeah,
That's why I wrote the book, is because we're starting in the wrong place and ending up in the wrong place.
yeah.
And I've often said the wrong diagnosis is never going to lead you to the right intervention. And if you don't understand the order in which to get the intervention situated, it's also not going to do any good. And then
Right,
everyone is sitting around pointing the finger as to who failed in this failed situation, when in fact we weren't even in the right ball field to start with.
right, right. Is this something that people can do? Do they have to come to you in order to do this neurofeedback process? Is this something that they can do virtually? How does that work?
Fortunately, I can say the reason I wrote the book is because we were able to get this situated 2.5 years ago, that I can work with people wherever they sit now
Oh,
at the
that's
same
fabulous.
the same process that we use in house. The only difference is there's a little bit different setup, a little bit of front end cost because you lease the equipment. We have to get licenses and fees paid, and there are some things like that we have to do with the software developer that's different than when you come into the clinics. But I have people living here in this same town who are doing it at home
Mm,
because they don't want to drive across town.
mm.
So you can do it essentially anywhere. And I will say I've actually worked with a woman in Switzerland, and we're getting ready to pick up another client, I think, in Switzerland as well. The key here, and I just want to be clear about this, I don't diagnose. I'm a certified rehabilitation counselor, and I'm certified in all 50 states and in Canada. So I can do, the rehabilitation piece of this, and it's just brain training. So we're just teaching the brain how to get stronger. And with that, nearly anyone can improve. I've worked with major league ball players. I've worked with gymnasts who came in after she came in. I need a tune up before I go to my meet. It's like, okay, let's get you focused and centered. And she came back wearing 5 medals after
Wow,
that.
wow.
So it's on kind of all ends of this. Can anyone tune up? Of course, we all could tune up. We could all go to the gym, most likely, if you think about it. And we really haven't had a lot of these tools available to us, although neurofeedback has been around for more than 50 years.
Oh,
We
wow.
really haven't had the awareness of this tool, and it hasn't been easy to deliver until maybe 10 or 12 years ago, when the gaming industry came on, and we have more powerful
Mm,
computers now as a result of the gaming industry, which we've got to have a certain level of processing capability on these computers to be able to handle both the Zoom, which eats up enormous amounts of reservoir in a computer, as well as the software system when
mm.
it runs. So we do a tech check. Prior to all of that, I do all the screening on the front end on the phone before we even start down the road. And then once we do the assessment, which we can do wherever you're setting, and we review that and you decide you want to go forward, then there's the lease agreement and take the payment for that. And then we ship everything out. And then what we will do is do another tech check to get everything set up before I invoice for the 22 sessions, which is the 20 sessions plus the 2 assessments at the end.
That's
So
amazing.
we can help people. I've dealt with people all up and down California and in various states as well.
Yeah, I love the idea that it's really for anybody, quite frankly, anybody who is trying to enhance their brain's capability, right? It's like cleaning out the cobwebs and making sure that you are operating at your peak performance. There's,
Mhm.
I think, individuals that are truly struggling. And then, I didn't even think about for those individuals that may be feeling as though I'm experiencing a little bit of cognitive decline. Is this just old age? Or is this something that I actually still have control over? That's fascinating that this
Mhm.
neurofeedback process can work for them as well.
It can't, and it's kind of that age-old thought that you hit a certain age and it's a downhill slide. It's like, no, it is not.
Yeah.
Life does not have to be lived in that manner, and there is something we can do about it. I will say, after a certain point, though, that's why you kind of want to get on these things earlier than
Mm,
it is later, because there are certainly people that have enough difficulties with processing at later stages of certain conditions that
mhm,
it may not be an easy return from. And so if we can catch it closer to the front end of that. And the other piece of this is people think if I lose my keys, I'm losing my memory. If you have visual processing and you don't have visual memory, you aren't going to remember where those keys are. So if you don't have visual memory and you're a child trying to get your backpack and your homework together, you can just hear the stories of the parents. You just had the homework 5 minutes ago. Where is it? They don't
yeah.
have it. They don't know. They don't have
But
a clue.
I would imagine that you would already kind of know that. It would be more in my mind, I'm thinking about for the person who is experiencing a change and saying, I used to be somebody that didn't forget my keys. Now I'm somebody that forgets my keys. Do you
Mhm.
also see that that is something that could pop up and could be addressed by doing something like neurofeedback?
Well, yes, absolutely. And I will say sometimes, and I kind of check in on medications too, because there are some medications that people don't necessarily realize some of the side effects can be some memory loss. And a lot of people are on a lot of medications. And one of the challenges that exist is that if there's a cocktail of prescriptions that people are taking, no one has studied that cocktail. No one knows necessarily what the long term effects are of that. And not infrequently, but certainly not all the time, treating physicians may not necessarily know that one prescription and another prescription are not necessarily the best combination for someone.
Yeah.
I recently had a gentleman who was on literally an entire page of medications of prescriptions. And my rehab counseling background is what I used to do all the time. And this was 35 years ago. I actually had a pharmacist I would call. And I would say, okay, this was before you really had good Google searches on medication. So I had to do it
Yeah.
the old fashioned way, which was have a resource in my back pocket I could call. And I would call this pharmacist. And I said, okay, I've got a client who's on this, and this. Are there any concerns? Most of the time he would say, yes. They should not be taking A and C together. It's
Hmm.
like, okay, I'm not a doctor, but what I will say to them is I've done some checking with this. You may want to have a conversation with your pharmacist to see. In today's world, there's the perception that this is all caught. I can tell
Yeah.
you it isn't. It
Yeah.
isn't. We think because everything's standardized in a computer-based system that this can't happen. That isn't true.
Yeah, I think that that is such a scary thing to
Mhm.
really wrap your brain around. And, it goes back to advocating for yourself and advocating to find out if there are other methodologies that are out there that could be either more beneficial or just as beneficial as taking some of the cocktails that they are currently prescribing. Um, so I
Right.
think that it's always wonderful to be able to explore other routes and not just feel as though you're stuck to one path.
Well,
Uh,
and it's often why parents are seeking and people with ADHD are seeking because I think there's a greater awareness right now that taking a pill isn't necessarily the solution, long-term
yeah,
solution or the remedy. It may help for a little bit for a lot of things. And I just want to be on the record here. I'm not against medication.
yeah.
So I don't want someone calling you up and say, oh my gosh, no,
Nobody
no,
is recommending that you just immediately ditch your meds.
exactly. None of that's going on here. Talk to your doctor first.
Yeah, always.
However, being informed is also wise.
Mhm.
And so that's really what I help people do is just become well informed. about what their really health situation is and ask questions because people sometimes don't feel like they can ask questions or don't know what question to ask.
Yeah.
And so we can cover some of that in the intake. And as time goes on, it's like, well, let's take a look at this and see. So the difficulty with a lot of the ADHD medications is they were designed to, quote, get rid of the hyperactivity and increase focus. That might work for the people who have hyperactivity, but there's a whole lot of people out there who have difficulty with focus, attention, concentration, who actually they don't have the hyperactivity in their brain. And part of what we can do is actually assess for that in this tool that we use. And sometimes it's there, and people don't know that that's what's interfering with
Mm.
the ability to attend and concentrate. So we can really train the brain out of that.
Yeah, no, I'm so fascinated by this. Struggling myself to find the right combination of medications, finding what you said about not feeling heard, not feeling as though I'm being asked the right questions, because obviously I'm not a doctor. So I expect that the person that's sitting across from me is going to ask me some powerful questions. Being the coach that I am, right? I'm always waiting for what's the powerful question that you're about to ask me that's going to unlock this whole mystery that I've been trying to navigate for 40 years. And it hasn't come. It's just, of course, been increasingly challenging for people to get medications or to find an expert that is capable of helping them to understand what the entire landscape looks like. So I appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge with us today. I believe that this is going to be incredibly valuable for all of our listeners. Before I let you go, I would love for you to just tell us, where can we find you if somebody's interested in diving in to neurofeedback? How can they get in touch?
Mhm. So my website's my name. So it's www.conniemcreynolds.com. And up on the website, I have a free brief assessment that if you want to just stick your big toe in the pool, you can just sign up for that and it will send that to you. If you're interested in a little bit deeper before you want to dive into the book, there's a newsletter you can sign up with. And I promise you, I don't pummel you with a lot of newsletters. But you can actually get the first 3 chapters of my book that way and just kind of get a feel for, is this where I'm heading? There's a contact form. So if you want me to reach out to you, you can fill that out and either phone or Zoom. I'll do that 15, 20 minutes to just kind of help figure out what's going on. I do the pre-screenings for the intakes as well. And up on the website, there are a number of my podcasts. I've been a guest on, I think, over 70. We don't have all of those up there, but I've been on those. I've had several news interviews on TV news programs, and we're getting those links up there as well. And I've published. So the link to the book is up there, Solving the ADHD Riddle, which is available on Amazon, and it's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. And I did the voice for the audiobook. There's also a number of links if you want to learn more about neurofeedback and just delve into all of that. We have quite a bit of information up there as well as some videos that can be helpful for people to learn more about all of this if you wish.
That's fabulous. I know personally, I watched one of the videos on your neurofeedback page, and I think it was one of the students that you were talking about earlier, and just his testimonial about the experience that he went through and how it's changed his life. I found it absolutely fascinating to watch that personal testimonial.
Yes,
Dr.
he
Connie
really.
McReynolds. Yeah. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for being here with me today. Thank you for sharing all this information. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. It's been fun being here.